Welcome to Photography by Bike with me, Hippie Swift. On today's episode I'm going to be taking you through DSLR filmmaking and photography. Starting off, I'll be going through the aperture, what it means, what it does, etc. and shutter speed, and even contrast and highlights. And then I'm going to be taking you through how to actually take these photos and what each setting looks like in the photos themselves. There's lots of different buttons on this camera for all sorts of different things. Down the side here you have all microphone ports and everything like that. You don't really need to pay much attention to that. You just get used to that as time progresses and you get better as a photographer. Basically we're going to be just working with this button here for now. So if you come and take a closer look, I'll show you what setting it's on. At the minute I've got it set to aperture priority, but by pressing this button here and turning the dial you can move it onto manual mode for recording and things like that. But for pictures I generally have it on aperture priority, which gives me a good depth of field, in other words a good depth of focus to work with that I control at my own leisure. On the heads up display here, if it stops power saving and getting rid of all my dials, you can see there's loads of numbers and configurations and settings, and it's all very confusing. I'll just take you through these. This left one saying 400, that is the shutter speed. That means the camera is taking a photograph at 1/400th of a second, which is reasonably fast if you're taking landscape photography or anything like that. That's a good setting. For sports or take pictures of children or anything like that, which is very fast and moving all the time, you want a very high shutter speed, and this Nikon actually goes all the way up to 1/8000th of a second, which is very extremely quick. On the right hand side here you have the F number. This is set at F11, which is perfect for scenery or anything like that, so everything will be in focus. This F number is more or less how much is in focus in your target area through the lens. So if I had it at F11, near enough everything in the picture will be in focus, but if I turn this dial down at the front all the way down to 1.8, sorry, but this is a 50mm prime lens I have on it, and it goes all the way down to f1.8, which is ideal for getting the foreground blur and the background blur behind your target and in front of them. A large f-stop number will give you a small iris, which is perfect for landscape photography. And if you want loads of light and a very narrow depth of focus and field, go all the way down to a f number of 1 or 2, and that will give you a nice blurry background and foreground to frame your subjects nicely. This number here represents the ISO number, and that is how sensitive the camera is to light. So if you ever see a film shot in the dark and it's really grainy with white speckles all over the picture, that's the ISO doing its job nicely. The lowest this number can go is ISO 100, which is what you want in the daytime, although in shadow areas I typically put it up to about 4 to even 640 ISO, just to get the unlit areas in the corner of buildings and that sort of thing in shot, and they'll come up nicely on camera. Another setting to pay close attention to is the white balance. This is the bar running across the bottom here, so if I hold the white balance button and then flick across, you've got automatic, indoor mode, incandescent light mode, sunny, storms with a flash, you can put the flash on, cloudy, this one's for shadow areas like I was just talking about with the ISO, and then you've got 5000K, which is like a type of light, and then you've got predetermined, which you can set yourself. I typically, even in bright sunshine, prefer to have it on the cloudy setting, just so the highlights dull down a bit and the shadowed areas behind like trees and that sort of thing in buildings stand out even more. So let's go and try some of these settings out, and I'll talk you through them when I'm taking the pictures. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of Mr. Foxy over here. Mr. Foxy has been a companion of mine for years, so I'm sure he won't mind being a bit packed today. So let's go ahead and switch the old camera on. I'm going to put it in aperture priority, just so I can make sure that I'm getting the actual shots. If you put it on manual, sometimes you don't quite set the settings right when you're first starting up, and you can obviously just blur out the image with all black or all white depending on the sunlight in that specific split second. So let's go ahead and put this on f1.8, which is the aperture, the actual lens itself is wide open. So let's try that. In this picture you can clearly see the background's blurred right out, and it's got a nice depth of field, or depth of focus, sorry, on the subject itself. Right, so that's 1.8 out of the way. Let's try 0.4 f-stop. Right, a little bit of difference there. The background's not as blurred out, and you can see a bit more detail around his whiskers and that sort of thing. So now let's try an f7.1 and see how that looks. And there you go, you can see a little bit more detail. The fox is completely in focus in that one. As most people will tell you, an f-stop of 7 and higher, 7 or 11 and higher, that'll get pretty much everything in focus. So now let's go ahead and put it up to f11, which is more or less the scenery setting if you're taking a landscape photo or something like that. And let's see what that does. So that's a brilliant photo that. We've got all of the foxes in focus, a little bit more detail on the bite if you would like that, so you can see how it compares to the first one. So there you go, that's f.11. Let's actually wang this up to the full setting. I've never had it on f16 before, but I'm going to give it a go. And there you have it. Loads of beautiful pictures. As this camera is set to aperture priority mode, so you can just control the aperture, you'll notice that when this aperture moves, when you control it, the shutter speed also moves with it. This is the camera's estimated guess at the shutter speed you need for that actual picture. Right, we've done the subject photography, now let's move on to the main event, which is the landscape. There's not much to it here. Like I say before, if you're using an aperture of f7.1 or above, you're near enough got the picture in aperture priority, because cameras are really good at guesstimating basically how much the shutter speed should be. So let's go ahead, and as we did before, I'm just going to turn it on, it might help. I'm going to start off on f4 just so you get an out of focus picture, so you know what it looks like and why you don't go to a very low number aperture, which again means the lens is wide open to light. Let's try an f4. That is focusing all the way in the distance there, near them buildings right in the distance, and it doesn't look too bad, although it is very dark, because obviously with a low f number the camera guesstimates, as I say, the shutter speed, and that just gets wrong. So manual mode is a good option for landscape photography, although it is tricky to pick up and master. So let's try an f7.1 and see how that looks. Again, it's a bit dark, so I think I'm actually going to turn the ISO number up to 3200, the ISO number up to 3200. Now I'm going to take another picture in 7.1. And it's a little bit better, but not much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it onto manual mode and put the shutter speed down to 2/50th of a second. Take another picture in f7.1, have a look at that, and it's all white. So you can see the shutter speed was way too slow for the picture. So what we're going to do is we're going to bump that right up to shutter speed of 1000 and turn ISO down to 800. So there's ISO of 800, shutter speed of 1000, and an f aperture number of 7.1. And that is a bit lighter than the previous ones and darker than the last one, so let's keep working with that. It's on the cloudy setting at the minute. You can bump it up in post if you would like. But then again, this is about photography and taking good pictures, not just editing your pictures in your software. So let's try a slightly lower number at a shutter speed 800 and an ISO of 1000. Let's try that. And that's much better. Obviously here this time of year in the UK, everything's just really green, so it's not going to be a spectacular footage. Lots of people in the past have commented on what rubber grips and covers these are. These are made by a company called Easy Cover, and they actually do loads of nice portable lens covers, lens rings, and the covers for the cameras themselves. For protecting your camera, these are an absolutely brilliant idea, and they look quite cool, don't they, really? All of the buttons on here, they work. All the buttons tap and press and click just as they should, which is extremely surprising to me, because I grew up in a generation of just cheap plastic covers, but this one actually grips and hugs it, and as you can see on the top there, actually slides into things on this to keep everything nice and tight. I have actually had a few knocks and scrapes on this camera, and luckily with this it hasn't touched the camera whatsoever. I've actually dropped it on gravel before, nearly in tears because it landed on the lens. Looked at the lens, it was a bit scratched around the hood, so I've got a new hood for it now. Not that a scratched hood matters, but it's just aesthetics, isn't it, really? This ring cover, done a bit of saving of it, so it didn't scratch the lens too much, although it did break my manual to automatic manual, oh yeah, see, setting. So luckily this was on it, or the lens would have been ruined. These covers fit absolutely perfectly. I've got no issues at all. You can reach all the buttons and dials, you can look through quite nicely, and yeah, I think they're about 35, 40 pounds in covers. The lens rings are a few quid, but these are what saves your lenses when you're on your bike. Few lenses. This is a cheap nasty lens, this 55 to 200 Nikkor lens. I just have that just in case I'm over the other side of a river or a road or something and I need to take a picture of a bird of prey or something like that, or some deer in the field, then and there, and I just have that zoom lens. In here I've got another 55 to 200 millimeter lens, but this one's version 2. That's more for filming, like wildlife and that sort of thing, as it's much more clearer image, and the image stabilization through the lens is absolutely brilliant. Down here I've got a battery pack for my camera itself, which just screws on the bottom of there like that. My camera just died, so I'm actually now GoProing it, so I'm sorry about the picture and sound quality change. Yeah, nice manufactured case, just a small one, so I'm slinging it around my shoulder. Lots and lots of filters, which are, you put them on your camera lens and you can turn the filters around so that the sky darkens out a bit, so it's not too bright in your picture, so you can lower the f-stop and get a bit more light into your picture and scenery, or scene if you're taking landscape photography. So that's a really good idea to have, is a couple of polarizer filters and stuff like that. Last thing I mentioned, really brilliant, is a decent flash. You get a decent flash, and even in the daytime a flash does help for portrait photography and product photography and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just a few of my bits that I take just for photography when I'm out and about locally and on tours. But to actually record this, I actually need all this equipment here, and I've got 3 batteries. They're all dead now because of this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video and the local scenery. It's a lovely, lovely place to be out in the wilderness, so get on your bikes and do a bit of photography by bike. Many of us, basics of photography by bike. So it's unlikely that you're going to find. And cloud settings there are. You may indeed have a similar to right, so we have this and this is what it's done.